What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Today it is the LazyDaze channel and we're back at it again with some more history reaction for you guys today, and we have the Battle of Crecy 1346, the 100 Years War Part 1 by Kings and General. And today you have Tubby and you have Jack, and we're really looking forward to starting this series with you guys. Obviously we're British, so we're looking forward to finding out what happened.
There's always a history with the English and the French, and it's always good to know what's going on and what happened in the past with it all.
It's interesting to actually find out why there is such bad blood between the two countries. You know, I'm really interested to find out about that. Obviously, surprisingly, once again, this wasn't sort of really covered in our good old British education system.
Such a great education system. Fantastic.
So we're looking forward to finding out more. If you guys are enjoying our content and our reactions, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell.
A link will be in the description box down below for Kings and General's content, so go check it out, guys. It's definitely worth it. And we're going to jump straight into this.
There you go.
Yes, mate. I'm taking your job.
1453 marks a conclusion to the age of medieval Europe and the beginning of the early modern age, characterized by the feudal system's decline, increased economic prosperity, and more centralized government.
I thought that was a real
battle. It was famously the which saw Constantinople's final fall, but that wasn't the only earth-shaking event taking place in 1453. On the other side of Europe, a victorious French army marched into the city of Bordeaux and seized it, ending the final chapter in a century-long conflict between England and France, the 100 Years' War. How did this generations-long war begin? What were its famous figures, great battles, and impacts on the world? Welcome to the Kings and Generals series on the 100 Years' War, beginning with the Battle of Crecy in 1346. When William, Duke of Normandy, conquered England in 1066, his status as a vassal of France's Capetian kings gave rise to a paradoxical situation in Western Europe. The monarchs of England now held ancestral territories on the continent as a vassal of the French kings, while also being rulers of a strong realm. Sometimes they controlled even larger territories in France than their overlords, a trend which reached its zenith between 1154 and 1204, when the Angevins ruled more than half of the country.
Wow.
This didn't last for too long, however, as a succession of strong French kings, beginning with Philippe II Augustus, gradually conquered more territory, and by 1224, all English possessions on the continent, save for Gascony in the southwest. This narrow strip of maritime territory had grown prosperous under English rule and developed into an important source of royal income through the wine trade, often raising more in annual revenue than England itself.
Whoa.
Gascony's population valued the...
Wow, that one little bit is earning more gold than the England country itself.
And it's got wine.
It's
just French a piss up, mate. We just love a piss up.
We do love a piss up.
It's
we do.
1300s, 1200s, like we're all just like, yeah, mate, sod it. Let's just get bottles of wine in from France. Some mead.
Connection it had with the island monarchy, and were not French as we know the French in our time. The duchy's language in the Middle Ages was a separate Gascon tongue, and its people had little to no ties with the people of northern France or its Capetian monarchy.
Okay.
Right.
Contemporary author Jean Froissart goes so far as to call the inhabitants the English. In 1259, King Henry III was forced to sign the Treaty of Paris, in which he renounced his claims on most continental lands, but was confirmed in his status as overlord of Gascony, but only as a vassal of the French kings, to whom he was obliged to pay homage. This is widely thought to be one of the factors which made the 100 Years' War inevitable. Despite the peace, a number of dynastic and territorial wars over the next half-century ratcheted up the tension between England and France even more, giving both sides experience in raising armies and waging war. This state of affairs probably would have continued for a long time, but on January 31st, 1328, Charles IV, the last king of the main branch of the Capetian dynasty, died without a male heir and left his kingdom in a dynastic crisis. Despite the fact that the English king, Edward III Plantagenet, was a nephew of the dead king, the French lords decided that his cousin, Philippe of Valois, which was the cadet branch of the Capetian dynasty, would inherit the throne. To justify it, they cited the ancient Salic law which prevented women from inheriting any land, a ruling which affected Edward because he was related to Charles IV through his mother Isabella.
I see.
Edward at the time was young, and England was under the control of
so
Isabella.
Basically, like, Edward was entitled to it in some kind of way.
Yeah.
But they put Philip on there instead and used that excuse.
Yeah, so he couldn't get it and fall into British rule.
Yeah. Okay, it does make sense why they would try and do that.
Yeah, that's
of
fair.
Isabella and her lover, Roger Mortimer. So in 1329, he paid homage to Philippe VI. A year later, the now majority-age Edward and his supporters slew the despised Roger Mortimer and exiled Isabella to Norfolk, which allowed him to assume control of his kingdom. The newly minted English king marched north in 1333 and crushed France's Scottish allies at Halidon Hill, leaving David II to seek refuge in Paris at his allies' invitation, who then announced that any future talks must take Scotland's interests
so I
into...
do believe I did hear somewhere. I think they did. So he said it there. They were allies. I think it was the French. Basically,
it was the French-Scottish allies.
Yeah, but I think the French asked the Scottish. I think they sort of more enticed them. They were more the ones sort of going, "Oh, we'll help you.
Yeah,
we'll help you. Do you know what I mean? You're on the mainland. We'll give you gold. We'll do this. We'll do this if you attack them." And I think that's why they've also asked him to come
and
back.
it was saying that any further interest or deals done must have Scotland's interest in it.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah.
would count. Edward was not amused, and thereafter considered the French king, his nominal overlord, an adversary. This is probably what led England's king to grant the fugitive French Count Robert d'Artois refuge in 1336. He had been found guilty of poisoning his aunt in a dispute over the inheritance of the eponymous County of Artois, condemned to death and then chased out of France. Robert arrived in London and was warmly welcomed by Edward III, who granted him an earldom, a few castles and stipends, despite the fact that Philip VI had declared himself a foe of any who harboured the criminal. When Philippe sent a demand to Edward through the Seneschal of Aquitaine, ordering his vassal to surrender Artois, the demand was rejected and both parties began preparations for war. Since Robert was actually in England,
so
where Philippe the
basically, because the country or the place where it was getting more selling the wine, basically they've sent an adversary from there to Edward saying, look, because you're a vassal of this part of this land, you need to follow our rules, you need to give them back to us. And he said no. So obviously they're about to go to war. Right. Yeah, makes sense. It does make sense why he said earlier on in the video that because the agreement they had with that country was done the way it was done, the outcome was inevitable. You can see why.
Sixth technically had no jurisdiction over Edward. Rather than in French territory, the order was viewed to have no legal legitimacy, which further displayed the king-vassal paradox created by the Norman conquest of England. All of these tensions came to a head on May 24, 1337. On that day, Philippe declared that Aquitaine no longer belonged to Edward because of the many excesses, rebellious and disobedient acts committed by the King of England and against us and our royal majesty. In particular, citing his granting of haven to Robert Artois. The king then called his feudal lords to summon to war, the so-called arrière-ban, and this is widely seen as the beginning of the 100 Years' War, despite the lack of actual declaration. Instead, it was the culmination of many growing tensions, such as the gradual centralization of government, the unworkable nature of the Plantagenets' vassal status, and other factors. The conflict began on two fronts almost immediately, as the French began raiding an under-garrisoned Gascony. While that was happening in the south, a cash-strapped Edward III crossed the Channel into Flanders, England's closest commercial partner through the lucrative wool trade, and purchased the Holy Roman Emperor Ludwig IV's allegiance, but didn't gain too much benefit from the expense. Even after being forced to sell the royal crown of England off for funds, Edward launched a campaign into France with around...
Wait, what?
Did I hear that correctly?
He sold the English crown off for funds? Yeah, you heard that correctly.
Are you taking the piss?
Benefit from the expense.
Right.
Even after being forced to sell the royal crown of England off for funds.
Sold the royal crown of England off for funds, bro. That's how much he had to, he wanted to commit to this fight so much. Now that you mentioned the Plantagenets, I do remember some bits and pieces about the Plantagenets I've read online. Not loads. It's hard for the information to stay there, but I do know a lot. And yeah, I think a lot of these people didn't really want him to do this war, so he's had to get the funds himself.
Okay.
That's absolutely outrageous.
That is. I can't believe they sold it.
Yeah. It's.
No.
Wow. Imagine being that broke at one point.
God.
The funds.
I don't think the country's ever felt
launched
it.
a campaign into France with around 12,000
yes,
troops, and eventually faced off against Philippe and his army, who outnumbered him 2-1 at Flamangerie in October. After a tense standoff, Edward retreated back into friendly territory, and Philippe didn't pursue him.
Okay. Not wanting to get anyone
Though
else
it was
involved.
brief, the 1339 campaign was nightmarish for the local populations in Edward's wake. Medieval military strategy was to inflict as much carnage against hostile cities and agriculture as possible, which would weaken the enemy government, economy, and ultimately hamstring its ability to wage war. The English king had seen the effectiveness of such tactics, especially in rich and densely populated lands such as those in northern France, and so the notorious chevauchée was born. While not yet fully developed, these chevauchées were low-cost raids, using limited resources, with the deliberate aim of systematically devastating and lowering the productivity of territories through which the raiders marched.
This makes sense.
All the while enriching the invader and weakening the allegiance between the conquered and their king. As the 100 Years' War progressed, the utility of this strategy was to prove itself indisposable. By the time 1340 began though, Edward's campaign had left the king even more monetarily destitute than ever, but this didn't stop him from formally proclaiming himself King of England and France in Ghent during January of that year. The situation in the Channel wasn't going in Edward's favour.
It's a bit of an insult, really.
It's kind of an insult, yeah. he's oh god.
But I understand it because he had Normandy. He come from Normandy, which is the top part of France. I think he had royal blood, so he is technically has a claim to the throne of France. But it's still,
Oh mate,
yeah.
I'd be pissed if Putin crowned himself King of Russia or King of England. Sorry. What would you do if he just went, "I am now the King of England"?
Yeah, it'd be an interesting one.
I mean, yeah. I'd be pissed, and I think everyone else would be.
English coastal towns had continuously fallen victim to seaborne raids from French attacks. While the Plantagenet king's own captains often managed to retaliate with equal rapacity, Philippe VI had the larger navy, and there was a real possibility of England being invaded. Edward III therefore returned to England 2 months after his coronation in Flanders. The fact that he owed money to prominent creditors in the area also provided adequate reason to get off the continent. After making landfall, the king raised a new tax and immediately began assembling new forces for the war. Reinforcements and ships, mainly 150 or so converted merchant vessels known as cogs, were assembled at Orwell in Suffolk, ready for the attack.
Jesus.
When all was prepared, Edward announced against the advice of his many close officials that he was going to attack France's 200-vessel-strong armada, which was anchored in modern-day Belgium, and destroy it. In defiance of those members of his entourage who decried the apparently foolhardy naval assault, Edward III proclaimed that, "I shall cross the sea, and those who are afraid may stay at home." He set sail on June 22nd, 1340. 2 days later, Edward's fleet managed to trap Philippe's ships at the port of Sluis, using favourable conditions and a hail of withering arrow fire from longbows to gain control of the battle. It was a decisive and surprising English victory. 10 to 20,000 French were killed, and it is said that only Philip VI's jester dared to inform him of the disaster.
That has got to be the first naval victory for England.
No, I don't.
Because he said that France had a bigger navy than England, right?
At that point
in time. So that had to be our first large... I'd consider that a victory for England, and as a first scale...
You're not hearing me out. The thing with it is before you say something like that, think that we're in 1346.
Yeah.
The way history goes is a country can be at one point financially unstable, and then at another point be a country can go in and out. So even though we couldn't have had a large fleet right now because we didn't have one, a previous 3-4 generations ago there could have been a king that did raise a bigger fleet.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
We're only
in we're in 1346 BC, so I'm not too sure if it was the largest.
Not the largest,
fleet.
but like the first sort of
the first British
victory for naval forces.
Naval
if they would consider.
I'm not too sure. Let us know in the comments down below which was our first sort of naval victory. At what point would you say our first naval victory was as well?
Yeah.
But yeah, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll get where you're coming from.
I get it's 1346, but yeah, I'm not too sure. Like how many wars have we had with the French before this?
Yeah.
With the French before this? Is this? I don't think this is the first French war.
Yeah.
I'm 90% sure they said earlier on in the video it wasn't. So I'm not. I'd be careful with sort of saying like stuff like that, you know.
However, Edward was undermined by resistance against his tax collection at home, and this forced him to go back to England. At this point, the 100 Years' War transformed into a proxy war when Duke John III of Brittany died in spring of 1341, igniting a succession crisis between his half-brother John of Montfort and niece Jeanne of Blois. This drew in the larger surrounding powers. England, the duchy's merchants and its peasantry, largely supported the former, while France and the higher nobility sided with the latter. As well as opening up another front against Philippe VI, Edward's geopolitical interests were served by getting involved as well. English trade, reinforcement and communication routes by sea to Aquitaine went around the coast of Brittany, and a hostile ruler in the duchy might sever those vital connections. The war was initially going France's way, until Edward sailed to Brittany with a small navy in 1342, and launched a blistering chevauchée through the enemy lands, before besieging Rennes, Nantes and Vannes. After a few months campaigning, however, papal envoys negotiated a 3-year truce, and the English king returned to his kingdom in January 1343. Pope Clement VI tried to end hostilities by mediating a peace conference at Avignon the year after, but neither side would agree to the terms put forward by the other, and the war continued unabated. 1345 saw the first major English military venture into Gascony, with several thousand men under the Earl of Derby retaking Bergerac and then defeating a French counterattack in October. This action gave Edward time to plan and amass his forces in England. He sailed from Porchester in July of 1346 and landed at the Norman town of Laogue with a large army, much to the surprise of the local population. This new theatre of war in Normandy was virgin land heretofore untouched by the conflict, and because of that, its devastation would massively affect any taxation that the Valois king hoped to extract from it. In addition, the destruction would diminish Philippe's prestige and hopefully goad him into an ill-considered battle. Whether Edward actually planned to campaign in Normandy is a matter of debate though, with some historians even claiming that the plan was to campaign in Gascony, but was thwarted by unfavourable winds. Whatever the case, the English army rested for the night, then set off at dawn, launching a blistering chevauchée throughout the Cotentin Peninsula. Normandy's rich countryside was intentionally ruined. Mills, barns and orchards were burned, while barrels of wine were smashed or stolen. Nothing was to be left for the French.
Just going to say that now, they weren't smashed, every barrel of wine was stolen.
Edward III reached Caen on July 26th, but despite accepting the garrison's surrender, his army raped, plundered, torched and killed without quarter. When the 3-day sack was complete, 3,000 townspeople were dead, and the king began sending barges filled with looted riches back to his kingdom.
Oh my god.
As a wave of terrified refugees fled before him, the English king marched inland towards Paris. At the same time, Philippe VI had received word of the landing and was massing a large army near Saint-Denis. However, it wasn't ready for battle yet, and therefore couldn't intervene as Edward reached Poissy, from where he sent raiding parties out to burn Saint-Cloud and Saint-Chamond within sight of Paris's very walls. The English had shown Philippe's subjects that he couldn't protect them, and began marching north again, but now the French army began chasing them, and only narrowly missed an opportunity to pin Edward on the Somme's south bank. After he managed to cross, the now campaign-hardened army of England encamped in the forest of Crécy.
That could have been
devastating.
If we had got caught by that river,
yeah,
that would have been terrible.
On August 26, 1346. Though Edward had managed to evade Philippe's larger army so far, the Valois monarch's vanguard was getting unnervingly close, so his Plantagenet foe prepared to turn and fight. After a brief reconnaissance, a plan was devised. As Philippe's host, the flower of medieval Europe slowly got closer. Edward drew up his now reduced forces on an elevated ridge between Crécy and Wedicourt, which looked south into a valley, daring the French to try and knock him off it. Exact figures for army size are impossible to calculate, but Edward's was probably just over 14,000 strong, made up of 2,500 chainmail-clad men-at-arms and dismounted knights, 2,500 spearmen, and 3,250 light cavalry, known as hobelards. A further 7,000 were England's lethal archery corps, armed with longbows
Do you know
and...
much about our longbow?
I know that they were fucking devastating.
Yeah.
Like they did damage back then.
And armour-piercing bodkin arrows. Since the reign of Edward I, every English village had been tasked with contributing men to the National Reserve of Archers precisely for this kind of battle, and were legally obliged to train in the longbow's use each week. This force was divided into 3 groups. 2 were in front on the left and right. The former was commanded by Earls Arundel and Northampton, while they followed Edward III's son, the 16-year-old Black Prince, into battle.
16 years
old! The King's
old!
division remained in the rear as a strategic reserve. All 3 had infantry in the centre and longbowmen on the flanks, while fronted by a series of pits, trenches and stakes to serve as a defence.
Yeah, so interesting.
Edward went in among his men, inspiring and encouraging them, so that men who were inclined to cowardice became brave, whilst also warning them not to plunder until he gave permission, as doing so would endanger the army. morale and discipline taken care of,
Nice.
the king allowed his troops to break ranks so they could sit, eat and replenish their strength before battle was joined.
That's smart.
The king himself took up command of the field on an elevated windmill near his reserve division. Philippe's strung-out French army began its approach by late afternoon, consisting of just over 30,000 troops, 12,000 mounted knights, 12,000 infantry, and 6,000 crossbowmen. Since the sun was about to set, and the army was exhausted from the day's march, France's Valois king intended to heed the counsel of his outriders to encamp for the night and attack at dawn, when the soldiers would be better rested and prepared. However, a combination of chivalric pride and Philippe's lack of control created a situation where he had to attack. It was close to 6 p.m. by the time Valois contingents began their assault. First to advance up the ridge were the Genoese and French crossbowmen, who lacked their protective pavis shields. As they went forward, a short but incredibly intense thunderstorm soaked the battlefield, damaging the crossbows and rendering them useless. In contrast, the unhindered English longbowmen stepped forward and let loose a storm of arrows, slaying a great number of their French counterparts and setting the rest to flight. Witnessing what they had saw as detestable cowardice from their fleeing skirmishers, the Count of Alençon bellowed, "Ride down this rabble who block our advance," at which point the first contingent of knights charged forward and unceremoniously cut down their own infantry. This pointless exertion bogged down the knightly advance and left it struggling at the base of the ridge. At this range, the longbowmen loosed with deadly precision, slaying the French and panicking their horses, the latter helped by 3 organ guns which made a clamour of noise. Though some of the heavily armoured warriors managed to reach the English line, they were hacked to pieces by Edward's dismounted knights. The first charge had been a complete disaster, but the day was not yet over.
Right,
wait,
so
what? I just need a minute to process all that.
So what in my mind is going through right now is the French guy just went, "Nah, fuck you lot, we need to attack now." And we're going to. So the first lot of crossbowmen have started walking up there, and then a thunderstorm has happened.
So what's happened is he sent his skirmishers in, they're skirmishers.
But he sent the crossbowmen up there, and then the thunderstorm happened.
Yeah.
So it rendered them useless.
Yeah.
And then they just got completely and utterly destroyed.
They started retreating.
And as they're coming back,
yeah,
they've just been slain by their own cavalry.
Yeah, because they were retreating because they were cowards.
And then the cavalry's had to come back.
No, well, the cavalry got slaughtered as well, yeah. I can't...
Why would you slay your own men in retreat?
It is also to show that the rest of your men not to retreat.
Yeah, but, oh, God.
Yeah. Like, you would have, like, I don't think I would have slain them. I would have found out what was wrong. And if they had said their machinery had a, like, malfunction, I would have answered that. But then also, don't they have swords? I think they probably have short swords. They're skirmishers. Like you don't know what the situation is. It's so hard to say. But it is absolutely outrageous that he's not... I think it's more outrageous that he sent the knights in to continue... Them. No, not just to slay them.
To continue after the onslaught.
Yeah, to then go attack like the heavily defended line that they have.
Yeah,
like that's what I think was more silly. Like, yeah, I don't think killing the skirmishers was a good idea, but I can kind of understand you're doing it for morale reasons. Not a choice I would have made, but I can sort of make sense.
Yeah,
but then sending the knights in after that to try and break the line, I think is a bit more stupid.
I think humans were definitely thick as pig poo.
Well, look at me and you.
Yeah, we are no exception.
No, that's what I'm saying. We're thick as pig poo right now. These guys are just watching two monks like go over history. Cheers, guys.
We appreciate it a lot, guys. We learn from this, man. We learn more from this than we did in school.
Undaunted by the initial failure, France's mounted knights continued to mount charges on the English line, putting particular pressure on the English right flank. where the young Black Prince was almost killed. Almost surrounded by the superior numbers of his enemy, the Black Prince sent for help from his father, who refused, and famously stated, "Let the boy win his spurs, for I want him, please God, to have all the glory." After a while, however, the king did send 20 hand-picked knights to assist his son, who found that the Black Prince's contingent had already managed to remove the charge, and were now recovering.
Okay, my guy was like, "Dad, I need some help." Yeah, no, you got this, boy.
No, yeah, that's it. He just wants him to make his name for himself.
He needs, he can't just have his dad come and say.
But he was like, look, just make
20
sure he survives.
hand-pick guys, yeah.
Just make sure he survives. Like, I bet you that was it. Like, try not to get involved. Just make sure you don't die.
It was the instinct in his mind was like, look, can you just get 20 lads? And just make sure he's not dead.
And then they turn up and he's just like, no, I've done it.
He's probably covered in blood. All of his men are literally panting, like roaring, and they're just like, "Yeah, no, your son's fine, bro.
Yeah, he's good.
Before the enemy returned. In a subsequent attack, the blind king of Bohemia, John, ordered his knights to tie their horses to his own and led their liege into battle.
Right, so he was
actually blind. I was about to ask the same thing.
This is a saying. He's actually blind.
He's actually blind. He's got two men. Mate, this is a good story already.
Is good.
Mate.
Blind general.
Blind
Go
general.
on, son.
And he's like, no, you need to lead me into the charge.
Strap the horses up to mine and we'll go for it.
I just thought though, in the midst of battle, how many Frenchmen do you think he killed? Just not realising, and the carnage going on, oh my!
I want to see how well he done, bro. I want to see how well he done.
That's so funny.
That's incredible.
Knights to tie their horses to his own and led their liege into battle. This charge began well, managing to get past the archers, but they were then all cut down by the English infantry.
Whoa.
The French unsuccessfully charged 15 times in all, each becoming more disorganised and hopeless than the last.
I respect him and his infantry for going in there.
Yeah.
I fully respect that.
I'll give you that, yeah.
I was not expecting them to get anywhere close.
No.
That is, and they failed another 15 times.
Another 15 times.
Battle progressed. Even Philippe VI himself joined the fighting. He was injured by an arrow and had more than one horse killed under him before the battle finally calmed. Witnessing the disaster that was unfolding, one of the Valois king's vassals persuaded him to withdraw. He did so reluctantly, fleeing with what was left of his army to a nearby royal chateau and then all the way to Amiens.
Oh, wow.
That was a strong defence.
In the dark, the English slept on their ridge, not realising just how much of a terrible...
what I liked was you saw how, you had the centre of the arches in a slight semicircle.
Yeah.
And then on the sides, I thought that was quite an interesting way to have them in a semicircle.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It does make sense, but yeah, I just never thought of it.
They had inflicted on the French. They had lost less than 100 men, while Philippe had lost over 10,000, including 1,500 lords and knights. While Edward III's tired troops were in no position to chase Philippe, he had gained a great victory and wanted to exploit it, marching to the port of Calais after his army rested and putting it to siege. As the town slowly Philippe, he had gained a great victory and wanted to exploit it, marching to the port of Calais after his army rested and putting it to siege. As the town slowly starved, further good news came that a Scottish invasion, prompted by France, had been crushed at Neville's Cross near Durham. Calais fell on August 3rd, 1347. It would remain in English hands until 1558.
Wow.
Our series on the 100 Years' War will continue in the coming weeks, so make sure you are subscribed and
I'm looking forward to finding out what happens in the next episode.
I didn't realise it was going to be that mad on the first one.
Yeah,
I'm already hooked on this.
Hooked. We've got the son obviously making a name for himself in the battle.
Yeah.
We had the blind guy getting two of his men to lasso to his horse and just charge in battle. That was absolutely
And you've
epic.
just got an idiotic French
leader
that's just sending his men to death.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to finding out what happens in the next episode.
Definitely.
If you guys are enjoying our reactions, then please like, comment,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell, and we will catch you in the next video.
See you in a bit.